I loved the first season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Now, I know that's an unpopular opinion, but it's one that I will take to the grave. So, I could not have been more hyped for season 2. I was looking at all the still photos they put out. I was keeping up with news on it. I was watching the trailer over and over. I watched this season like a hawk. There was no way it could disappoint me. Yeah, it disappointed me. Don't get me wrong, season 2 of this show is not bad. There is not a single bad season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but it's definitely the only season I've watched where I say, yeah, it's alright, I guess. Even when I was young and it was hard for me to dislike something I watched, this season just didn't do it for me in the same way season 1 did, and I spent years trying to figure out why it was that season 2 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was disappointing. And it took up until I finished rewatching it to make this video that I finally figured it out. I just straight up do not feel as invested in the characters and their storylines in this season. They are very forgettable. This season kicks off with Coulson picking up the pieces of a now broken S.H.I.E.L.D. Skye is an official field agent, May's her SO, Simmons is undercover at Hydra, Fitz has brain damage, which we'll talk about soon, and Coulson's recruiting a bunch of people, which brings in several new characters for this season, including Lance Hunter, who doesn't have the best writing in this season, Bobby Morse, who doesn't have the best writing in this season, and Mac, who doesn't have the best writing in this season. Although all three of those characters did significantly improve in season 3, and Mac actually went on to be probably my favorite character on the show. Season 2 is the first season of S.H.I.E.L.D. that really split the season into arcs. Season 1 sort of had that, but not really. That was more of a tonal shift. In season 2, it's the first half of the season is one arc, then it changes, then there's a second arc, and then there's just an overlying thread that ties them together at the end, and this was the first season that does that. The first 10 episodes of this season focus a lot on the mysterious writing on the wall that Coulson was leaving at the end of season 1, with this thing called the obelisk, which is absolutely terrifying and gives us a great Peggy Carter cameo as sort of their central MacGuffin. And then Daniel Whitehall, who looks a lot like my high school principal, is the main villain. The second half of the season dives into the Inhumans and the S.H.I.E.L.D. versus S.H.I.E.L.D. conflict, with Skye's mom being the main villain and Skye's dad being the character that links both of these storylines. All three of these storylines on paper are amazing, but I do take issue with the execution of all of these. When it comes to the whole obelisk thing, I think this is the best storyline of this season. I think this is the best arc, and it is nice to see Peggy Carter again, and her show started the same year as this season, so I wonder if they put her in it intentionally to reestablish her into the universe before going into her show. I will be reviewing the 2 seasons of Agent Carter after I finish reviewing Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., so definitely stay tuned for that. That's a good show. But my issue is Daniel Whitehall. I really don't like this villain. There's like no emotional attachment to him. There's no sympathy for him. He's not even memorable. If he was the main villain of a movie, sure, I could look past it. But the issue is he's the villain of hours upon hours of television. He is directly linked to Skye's past, her father, her mother, the Inhumans. Everything that happens with Skye going forward traces back to Daniel Whitehall. He should be the best villain of the show. You should care about him with how important he is, but he's just the most one-note character. He is a character that exists for the sole purpose of propelling every other character's story, but that doesn't mean he shouldn't also have a compelling story. But he doesn't. This season peaks halfway through with what I consider to be the only truly fantastic episode of the season. It's when Reina and Skye are in that Kree temple and they undergo Terrigenesis and Trip dies. That scene is a 11 out of 10 scene, everything in it, the writing, the acting, the music especially. I love that moment, I love that episode, but that's the only episode of this season that is memorable. And that one episode changes the entire trajectory of this show and what they're able to do, and it's perfect. Only issue is there's 21 other episodes that are just okay. Now the second half of this season is a masterclass in how to be boring. I'm only kind of exaggerating. Sky goes and hides with the Inhumans for several episodes and just, dicks around. Sure, she does learn how to use her powers, and that's cool, but it's like you're sitting there and you're like 7 episodes later, you're like, oh my god, she's still here. And then you have Coulson and Hunter who are on the run because S.H.I.E.L.D. 2.0 is here, and they're trying to take over to be a different S.H.I.E.L.D. I'm not joking in any way when I say that I despise this plot line. I legitimately do not see any redeeming qualities in the S.H.I.E.L.D. versus S.H.I.E.L.D. storyline that they set up. And it's only in the show for 2 reasons. While Sky's dicking around doing absolutely nothing and setting up an actual antagonist, they needed an antagonist so that the audience didn't fall asleep. Only issue is the antagonist they picked make me fall asleep. And number 2, they needed to hit the 22 episode mark, and this gave them some content. It is the definition of filler. And it makes no sense, because the entire goal of the second S.H.I.E.L.D., the whole reason they exist, is because they don't like that Coulson's keeping secrets, and they want to run S.H.I.E.L.D. more like Fury ran it. Fury had secrets. Fury had secrets for his secrets. Fury was able to convince the Avengers, including but not limited to Tony Stark, Captain America, and Natasha Romanoff, that he was dead. And 2, the story never goes anywhere. It just kind of peters off, and then they fold it back into the actual S.H.I.E.L.D. when it's time for the actual main conflict of the season, and they no longer need this stupid other S.H.I.E.L.D. And then Gonzalez just gets killed, and then they just go back to the way Coulson was running things. So it doesn't affect anything. It has no effect on the story of this season. It has no effect on the storyline in future seasons. It doesn't change Coulson as a character. It doesn't change any of the S.H.I.E.L.D. team as characters. Even Mac is like, hey, this isn't the S.H.I.E.L.D. I want to be a part of. I'm like, cool, consequences. But then he just comes back, and he's just a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, and they take S.H.I.E.L.D. over from Coulson when Coulson's ready to die. 0 consequences for this boring-ass storyline. Sky is not exciting in this season. Sky spends the first half of this season walking around looking for the obelisk, and then she spends the second half of the season walking around wishing that she wasn't walking around looking for the obelisk. Now, there are a few twists in the season, I will say. Jia-Ying is Sky's mom, and Jia-Ying is the villain. Neither of them are interesting because we know that she's Sky's mom in like the 4th episode, so all we're doing is just waiting for it to eventually be revealed to Sky, and it was pretty clear that she was going to be the villain. And for some reason, they take the Disney Plus angle with this and not actually reveal who the villain is until the penultimate episode. So then she's just the villain for 1 episode, which brings me back to my filler thing of them needing unbelievable amounts of filler because the entire back half of this season just really doesn't have a villain. It's so boring. And Jia-Ying is a shit villain. I don't care about her at all either. Her and Whitehall, I couldn't give less of a crap about. It's really funny because this show has some amazing villains. Ward, Hive, Ada, Radcliffe. Great villains. And then they also somehow have 2 of the worst villains. The cool villain of this show is Sky's dad, played wonderfully by Kyle MacLachlan. Now, the reason he works is because he actually has depth and complexity and actual character to him. And that's something missing from both Whitehall and Jia-Ying. They're just very one note. They even try to give Jia-Ying some motivation, and I'm like, yeah, it's the bare minimum of motivation. At least she has motivation, but I still just don't give a shit about the character. Whereas with Cal, Sky's dad, I do. He is a murderous psychopath, but then at the same time, he's really loving, and when, like, Sky's around him, you feel safe, and he'll beat someone up. He'll beat someone to death, then turn around and apologize and say that he's sorry he had to do that. And he's just someone who wants his family to be together. And I do like how they resolve that character with his memory being wiped and him becoming a veterinarian, which was, something he was, and him still getting to be there. So they could have brought him back if they wanted to. They just didn't want to. But I like that he doesn't have the conventional ending. He doesn't die or anything. He actually gets sort of redeemed. He gets a bit of a redemption arc. It's not a full-on redemption arc turning him back into a good guy, but the last act he does is a good one. He kills his wife to save his daughter, which is cool. But the two best characters of the season are Reina, and to no one's surprise, Grant Ward. Reina is actually a very significant character in this season. She gets a lot more play from season 1, and she's the antithesis to Sky. They went through Terrigenesis at the same time, and they came out with, Sky, or I guess Daisy as they reveal in this season, looking just absolutely gorgeous, and then Reina is just a walking porcupine, and she goes on her own little character arc about that, and it's really nice. But then she gets stabbed in the neck and she's just gone. And I was like, don't kill Reina. But they killed Reina. And Ruth Negga plays these two different Reinas perfectly. I say two because she becomes a very different character after Terrigenesis. She starts off with that typical Reina that we all know and love from season 1, and then after Terrigenesis, when she becomes a walking porcupine, she is this very broken and depressed version of herself, but there's still a hint of the original Reina locked away in there. It's a really great change, and she plays it perfectly. Oh yeah, and this show deals with trauma like it's going out of style. Fitz has brain damage for most of this season and is just trying to recover. There's a whole story arc where he's trying to figure out cloaking, and he's talking with Mac, and he spends this entire episode just speaking in riddles because he doesn't know what he's saying, and no one else knows what he's saying, but Mac ends up figuring it out, and it makes the close bond that they share throughout the rest of this series. And Reina, well, she just straight up tries to kill herself. And Ward is once again a great character, and the episodes that focus on him are some of my favorites. There's a episode that detracts a bit. It doesn't super detract from the main storyline, but part of it does, and it's Ward hunting down his older brother. And it ends in the most badass way. Another episode I love is when the original team all has to work together, and they bring Ward in for that, and it's the 6 people from season 1. But it bothers me that Ward's the best antagonist in this season because it's really not his season. But holy shit, there is a torture scene in this involving him and Bobby that is so disgusting that it's hard to look at. I think when they shoved the bamboo thing up Bobby's fingernail, I think I actually did look away. They got away with showing a lot of stuff in this season because season 1 was very tame. And season 3 is pretty tame also. Season 4 is darker. But this season, there's a couple things they do. I'm like, how did you get away with showing that? Now, the reason I'm praising the Ward stuff so much is because he actually gets to do something in this season. He goes on a storyline with a beginning and an end. He goes on a character arc. He starts here, he goes on an arc, and ends here. He is the only character that feels active. So all the other characters in this season feel like they're passive, like they're taking a backseat and just watching everything. Ward's the only one where it feels like he's actually getting stuff done. And I would like to once again point out that Ward is just a subplot in this season. He's like just an inconvenience that the heroes keep having to deal with. He's not the main guy at all. The 3 main plot lines are less exciting than the subplots. Now, you know what's dope and would be a contender for the best episode of the season, one of the best episodes of the show if it didn't make one mistake, and that's episode 17, which is titled Melinda. And it's the origin story of how May became the way she is, because we're always hearing teasing that May was not always like this. She was fun and loving, and she was a great person to be around. And then this happens, and they even tie it into the Inhuman storyline of there being this Inhuman girl who's mind-controlling people, and we don't see how it ends, but it's very heavily implied. that May ended up having to kill this little girl. And they even bring that back in season 4 for the framework arc. But the only reason this episode's not like A+ amazing is because it keeps cutting back to the boring-ass Jiaying and Sky subplot. Just focus on May. It's the cool part of the episode. This season is without doubt the worst season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's incredibly slow, and for most of the season, it just feels like nothing is happening. The new characters are unexciting, all the villains are uncompelling besides Ward, and it even feels like a lot of the main characters like Fitzsimmons and Coulson just don't really get to do anything. This season was very disappointing, but I realize I'm in the minority. Just about everyone else likes it more than the first season, but I firmly believe it's the worst season of this show, unless somehow season 6 and 7 end up being disappointing, because those are the only 2 seasons I still have not watched. But I doubt it. But they rectified their mistake, because seasons 3 and 4 are fucking incredible. Well, there you guys have it. That is my review of Season 2 of Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. What did you think of the season as well as my review? Let me know down in the comments below. Also, leave a like on this video, subscribe, click on the bell icon to receive all notifications from the MCHQ. That's going to be it. Have a great day, guys.